Okay, in this episode of Throttle Stop Garage, we're going to have a look at finishing the fender molds. Okay, so where did we leave you last time? Last time we left you with just how I was doing some of the basic repairs on the fender molds. There's a lot more than basic repairs that need doing. So I added the stiffening to the back. Just as a recap, I've added a little bit more to the front. My big concern is actually that the fender mold, as it sits right now, is, you can kind of see it as I just do that. Okay, so it's a little, give me a sec, it's a little flexy this way. So again, what I don't want to do is have it torque out of shape for any reason. What I've learned is once that carbon comes out of there, that's pretty much how it's going to be in terms of shape. So I have to get this thing stiffened up. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a central rib to the length of it, and then I'm going to make some ribs that go over the sides, okay? In the hope that I can take that torque out of it. Now, everything's all done up here, and I've kind of had enough of the itchy. So I know I have to redo some spots on this flange, and I'll do that. But boy, if I don't have to smell any more fiberglass in my life, I'm going to be just fine. So what I'm actually going to use is construction adhesive. So this is LePage's PL Premium Max. It's high solid content. It'll stick to fiberglass. It'll stick to wood. I've used it well, I've never used the Max one. This is a new product to me, but whatever. I've used lots of this stuff in the past, and I do know that it sticks. So again, we're just going to stick some wood. We'll make the wooden structure, and we'll put it onto the mold, and we'll stick it onto the mold. And then we'll talk a little bit more about some of the other modifications that we're doing in advance of getting these parts actually infused. All right, let's get to work. Okay, so first step for getting some of these little repairs done is to get some of this area sanded up. So I noticed this one flange just seemed to not have enough material on it. No idea why. Probably just missed it when I was making it. So I thought I'd add another couple layers of chop strand mat. I'm just soaking that in. So there's the second layer going down. I think there may even be a third. Anyways, that gets that stiffened up, and then once it's hardened, we're going to sand off the whole outside of both of these fender molds and get them prepared to add the wood. Alright, so we made a few decisions here. I've got my my gauge that I use for longer panels, and there's just a little bit of 1x4. Like, it's super cheap and it'll work, and I don't have enough bench space right now to even cut this stuff properly in the garage, so here we go. Add a little tape to get it in there. I keep turning around and using that crazy Aussie belt sander that I have in order to sand this wood up to get it to fit really closely first. And then I'm just going to use my, I have a finish nailer, just a little bit of glue and a finish nail there, just pop those things into place. Alright, so there's the two end bits. And then I'm going to add the diagonals to all of this. Now then the fiberglass structure basically closes the box, right? So if you think of it that way, then I've got a box structure here. You're not going to make this twist or turn. It's not going anywhere. So that's that construction adhesive. Slap it on there, tape it all up to hold it in. It's great at filling gaps. Everything's going to be fine. Come back 24 hours later, everything's fine. So these are now perfectly stiff. They don't move at all. Trim up my previous work and get ready for the next phase. So, what am I up to? Right, well, the front edge of these fenders, you'll notice, is somewhat convertible in that part that I've just got put on there will come off. So that's a standard fender molded there. But on the Canadian /Amazon /122, I always thought it needed to be a little lower. Like, it just the fender edge is too high. So I've dropped it 1 inch, and I've just got a little styrofoam in there to mock that up before I do it seriously. But and then I've cut and sectioned the fiberglass bottom part so that the fender arc continues on the same radius. So then I've cut the mold apart with my saw, sectioned out the piece that I need to section out, which was about 1/4 of an inch. And then I'm using some of this JB Weld polyurethane adhesive to stick the mold back together. Boy, does that stuff ever work good. It was just fantastic. Alright, so at this point, we'll call this the end of week 1. and we'll start week 2. Alright, so now I've got rid of the polyurethane, switched it out for a little bit of medium density fiberboard, and we've got that set in the hole. And now I'm just laying in a couple layers of masking tape before I add in some of this short strand auto body filler to get that profile just right. Now the tape is just there so that I can sand and not scratch the mold. And here I'm just using a razor blade. Once the filler gets kind of stiff but not fully hardened, I can pretty easily cut the shape in with a razor blade. If you've never used that technique, it saves a ton of sanding. Anyway, so now I'm getting close. I'm going to peel it off, and then I put in another layer of orange tape, which is quite thin actually, and just add in just to fill in the little air pinholes and gaps and things. And now I can sand it down, the final little bit of sanding, just to match that surface surrounding it. So that all turned out pretty nicely. Happy with how that worked. And now I need to add the flanging, of course, to that particular part, right? It's still not flanged correctly. We got to get there quick. So on the flanging goes here in just a second. And there we go, right? So glue guns back out a little bit of that flashing material. Make up the flanges for these 2 end pieces. Again, we're in week 2 here. Flanging material, bend it up, cut it off. Then we'll just go through the same process again, right? On the gel coat will go a single layer of fiberglass cloth, and then after that's hardened up, multiple layers of chop strand mat. So there's the first layer of gel coat going in, and then on we go with everything else, right? So in goes the cloth, just to hold the gel coat in place again. Same idea as what I did before. This entire process is now becoming pretty much second nature to me, unfortunately. I'd like it to go away. And in with the chop strand mat. Alright, so that's those parts pretty much finished. With the fiberglassing of these parts done, it's now time to see if the flanging material will come off. I mean, it should. It's actually still warm, so it's still exothermic. Let's have a look at how this comes apart. That's a good sign. Again, this little plastic, this is the tool I'm using. It's, what's it even called? Easy Pry. I got it at the auto body shop store. It's fantastic. It's great for this stuff. That works pretty good. Happy with that. Better to cut the gloves than to cut me. Stuff sharp. So once again, I've rounded those corners just using the clay, the modeling clay. So that's, you know, kind of a tried and true technique for me. Or at least I'm doing it all the time. I just tore the material right off. Hilarious. There we go. Like, so shiny, so smooth. Alright, that's gonna work. Lots of cleanup to do on this one though. Okay, so now those tested parts are back in place, and you can see they fit, but because I've added that flanging, we need to do a little bit of fine adjustment with the sander to make sure they're coming up against the flanges nicely there. So with that done, I need headlight rings. There's no way to mount my headlight buckets in this car on these fenders, in these molds. So clean up my old headlight buckets. Don't ask me about those. They are due for the trash. I did sandblast them first, but I needed to make sure they fit. So that's the inside profile. Now these old rings were just so rusty they aren't usable. So I just made sure I got everything sanded out so the headlight fit nicely into that form. And then because the outside of that ring is no longer really round, I thought, well, what am I going to do to make this mold? So I just cut it big, and then, yeah, just check it, make sure it works. Then I drew a circle the right size, because I need the depth now. Drew a circle the right size on this 1/2" MDF. Cut that circle out. Just make sure I've got it fit in properly here, and then I drill some holes. And then I'm going to use some welding rod as a registration pin. So that's how I'm going to get all of this registered in the right place when I'm done. It's all going to be centered. This actually does work, people. It's not as crazy as it seems. Right, so then the pins allow the oversized ring part that I'm going to glue on right there to get registered into the correct location. I'm going to clamp it all up. And then when it's dry, I'm going to use my big disc sander over there to sand off the unround of the other part and get it all put in place nicely. All right, so a little bit again of this waterproof body filler, the Dyna or whatever it's called, the short strand stuff. Get that all sanded up. We'll add the clay over top of that, this modeling plasticine, to create a nice relief for that flange. And then I'm going to stick it down to that. It's just a regular old piece of, like it's a shelf part, right? It's just particle board with melamine on it, super slick. So mold that up, a couple of coats of wax, and then the same process all over again, right? We're just going to go straight to this board. Now the only problem here is that the edges of this headlight bucket actually do have to be perpendicular, which is really tough to get kind of formed right. So again, we'll let that flash off with the gel coat, and then get this the cloth put on. All right, slop in a coat there of resin on it and let it harden up, and then we'll hit it with all kinds of fiberglass layers. All right, so this is being real careful to try to get this edge to reference right and everything to be okay. Torn up pieces always work better, by the way, than cut pieces if you're working with chop strand mat. It's a lot less frustrating to work with it that way. All right, so that's pretty much the same old here to get this job done. Well, let's see if we can get this out of here. Hey! I didn't actually think that was gonna work. I'll take it. It's pretty fantastic, really. Up to do, but it's got really good detail all around that edge there. That looks real nice. Okay, clean it up and we'll get it ready to go. All right, here's the start of week number 3. At least I think this is week number 3. I just finished this part up. Okay, so we're in here, and after many hours of sanding all of the body filler, I decided it was time to risk it and go ahead and hit it with the gel coat. Just remember, when you're putting gel coat on, if you're not putting anything over it, you need to have a wax additive to it so that it'll properly harden. So anyway, that's it for that. And now you got to sand the gel coat, right? Because you applied it with a brush, so that's going to take forever to sand. Now it's good and hard, so it's not that hard to sand the gel coat. Just starting here actually with 80 grit, then working through 120, and then finally, as I'm wet sanding, I get it all the way down to 2000 grit before I polish it. Right, so I have to add those end bits on before I do this, the extension part. So in they go with a little bit of regular old bathtub silicone caulking, and then just clamp that thing down. That's the last time this is going to come apart, unless I'm ever going to make fenders that are standard in dimension. So I always thought that the Amazon needed a little bit extra fender depth, so it'll drop the bumper, it'll change a bunch of other parts, but I actually think it'll look better, so this is what I'm doing. Here's the final wet sand on this particular mold, and you know, in and out of that bucket about 1,000,000 times, and away we'll go finishing up this job. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, we're just going to wrap this episode here because honestly, I've just got a little bit more sanding and I've got the final polish to do on the last mold. And that's 3 weeks worth of work so far. So as crazy as it seems, I'm out here at least 10 hours a day on weekends and every evening just to get this done. So I have no idea how many hours I've been out here over the last 3 weeks, but it's a lot. I've not taped most of it, just still hammering away on this, and it still isn't done. And there's no point. When we next meet, we'll be putting carbon fiber into the molds and we'll be making our first fender. So I'm very excited about that. I'm not very excited about continuing to have bleeding fingers finishing up the sanding in this mold. But that's enough for this episode. We're not going to learn anything more out of this, so we'll catch you on the next episode. Alright, so with the flanging done, it's now time to see, or with, cut.